Hey Nintendo fans, and welcome to the final part of our Space World video trilogy. We're ending with a bang, closing with arguably the largest Space World show of all time, and most certainly the one you still hear about the most often today. Space World 2000 was set to be huge, so much so that Nintendo went to E3 2000 and mentioned that they had a new console announcement, but only teased that everything would be revealed at their own personal Space World convention. It wasn't quick into the convention before the big bomb was dropped. This would become the face of Nintendo in the 6th generation of home video game consoles. Its early development name was the N2000, eventually codenamed the Project Dolphin, and its final title would be the Nintendo GameCube. However, this wasn't the expected name for the console at the time of its unveiling. Many outlets had noticed and reported multiple Nintendo trademarks for the name Star Cube prior to the Space World event. While its legitimacy is definitely questionable, an old TendoBox.com article revealed an image prior to Space World that could have potentially been a logo for the Star Cube, with an inverted N that also resembled an S on its side. There are also rumors that Hiroshi Yamauchi, Nintendo's president at the time, was a large supporter of the Star Cube name, and that name change could potentially been why he didn't appear at the console's Space World show. All of this is pretty baseless, but in the end, the GameCube name would stand over Star Cube. A few key hardware decisions from Nintendo were immediately apparent. The system's new ATI-powered graphics engine appeared to have much more raw power and effects capability than the current PS2 and Dreamcast systems on the market. And while this would end up slightly weaker than Microsoft's new contending console, the Xbox, the GameCube impressed the press from day one with its smooth textures and several different shading and lighting effects. There was still one slight misstep Nintendo made compared to the other contenders though. Remember all that talk about storage in part 2 of this series? Nintendo once again decided to try something a little different from its competitors. The Xbox and PS2 both had the capability of running both CDs and the new massive 4+ GB DVD discs, and they even eventually ran 8+ GB dual-layer DVDs as well. Nintendo, on the other hand, opted to use the smaller 1.5 GB mini DVD discs that we know today. While these discs were still much bigger when compared to the Nintendo 64's cartridges, developers did occasionally have to compress audio or use multiple discs to fit in all the content that they needed to. Nintendo had two main goals of this format. One was to reduce cost per disc, and two was to reduce piracy. While it didn't exactly use DVDs, the Sega Dreamcast disc-based system would eventually become one of the most easily piratable consoles of all time. Perhaps out of fear that the DVD could be as easily pirated as the Dreamcast's GD-ROM, Nintendo opted to use a more foreign format. The biggest thing Nintendo would end up missing out on, though, is the ability to play DVD movies. While a failed DVD-capable GameCube would eventually be launched in Japan, a staggering amount of homes in the West especially would end up simply using the PlayStation 2 as their first ever DVD movie player. This era would begin a divide between Nintendo and its competitors that you still hear about today, where Sony and Microsoft create devices that are often labeled as multimedia products, while Nintendo fiercely argues that their consoles are dedicated gaming machines only. Speaking of storage, the GameCube had one interesting difference when it was revealed versus the final product: the ability to use SD cards for storage. It's not known exactly what it would be used for, whether it be memory or the ability to add gaming data similar to the 64DD, but this functionality would be scrapped for the GameCube before showing up again on the Wii and the Wii U. There's only one other major difference I was able to find from GameCube hardware during Space World 2000 compared to the launch. A small difference with its controller. Everything appears identical except for some slight color changes and the shape of the B button, which looked identical to the X and Y buttons. But the true madness from Space World 2000 didn't really come from the box, it came from the games. Almost every single game shown in this event is so far back in early development that nearly nothing from this display resembles its eventual release. Today we're going to take a look at a huge handful of Space World 2000 demos that I found the most interesting. Keep in mind that while there are tons of pre-GameCube beta games out there, we'll just be looking at the Space World 2000 reveals that paired with the GameCube's first unveiling show. First up is Super Mario 128, a Mario tech demo that ended up confusing way too many people on whether or not it was a tech demo after all. The program featured Mario splitting up into 128 various mini-Marios, each which interacted with one another in comical ways as the spherical terrain around them warped. The demo revealed the GameCube's ability to show dozens of moving characters on screen at the same time without any kind of slowdown, but it definitely came across as a novelty more than an actual functional title that would be released for the system. Some fans felt that this would become that sequel we talked about in the last video, Super Mario 64 2. But come time for the GameCube's release, it became Nintendo's first home console to launch without a Mario title. assuming you don't count Luigi's Mansion. By Space World 2001, Super Mario Sunshine was revealed, and just about everyone brushed Super Mario 128 aside as the tech demo that it was. But in 2002, Miyamoto would take us on a wild, pointless ride. This year, he used an interview with Japanese Playboy Weekly of all places to reveal that both Pikmin 2 and a completely different 3D Mario title, Mario 128, were in development. And the hype train fired up once again. After years of vague interviews and nothing to show, Nintendo CEO Reggie Fils-Aimé claimed that we would learn about the game at E3 2005. But we still got nothing. Finally, in 2007, Miyamoto would admit that Mario 128 was a tech demo all along, and that elements from the demo would go into other games, such as that high character count being used in Pikmin, and the spherical era being the foundation for Super Mario Galaxy's gravity mechanic. But really? What was all this big talk about a sequel over the last 5 years? Just massive Miyamoto trolling? The world may never know. Another demo on display was Rebirth, a 3-minute pre-rendered demo reel, featuring a woodland creature, lots of nature, and water effects. This was never planned to be a game, or implied to be a game, but it still is a beautiful look at what the GameCube could offer. It kinda reminds me of that Japanese-themed graphical demo that they ran prior to the Wii U's launch back in 2011. Another demo that was said to have run alongside the Rebirth one is a reel for a game called Too Human, a part of Nintendo's new partnership with Silicon Knights. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to find any recorded footage of this specific version of the demo, only screenshots, but this game is one of the strangest stories I've heard for development in a while. It began as a cyberpunk shooter title for the PlayStation, but was eventually ported over to the GameCube with Nintendo's deal. Silicon Knights ended up pushing out 2 quality titles for the Cube, including Eternal Darkness and the Twin Snakes, but Too Human never ended up happening on the GameCube either. After a long process and a huge design overhaul, Too Human would finally be released as an Xbox 360 title of all things, and it wasn't met with the greatest reception. Still though, that is bizarre. A title that was planned as an exclusive for all 3 of the big 3 developers at one point, while seeing development over 3 separate console generations. That is crazy. While none of the space worlds we've covered so far have predominantly featured my favorite franchise, Pokémon, things would change in Space World 2000 with Meowth's Party. This seemed to be another example that served a similar purpose to Mario 128, a tech demo that displayed the GameCube's ability to render many moving characters at once. It was also thought that perhaps these many moving characters were a test for a future 3D Pokémon title like the currently existing Pokémon Stadium games. Ultimately, Meowth's Party was just that, but it saw strange life in 3 separate places. The first was Japan's 7th ending theme to the anime, which took a model based on the Meowth's Party demo and combined it with the show's 2D animation. Over in the West, Kids WB played this ending theme just 2 times total, once in Japanese and once in English. There's also a brief cameo of this demo in the Super Smash Bros. Melee trophies. Ever wonder why Meowth had a huge red guitar? Well, now you know. This demo was also shown as an unplayable video in the GameCube game Pokémon channel. And with that, we have gone full circle. Over a year ago, I mentioned this in my worst Pokémon games video, that we would do a Space World video someday. Turns out, I was telling the truth. Another memorable Nintendo series with some presence at Space World 2000 was the much-awaited Metroid. Despite several different developers being contacted to make a Nintendo 64 Metroid, a game for the series had never entered production. Simply seeing Samus in 3D had gamers pumped for the return of everyone's favorite bounty hunter, but it was interesting to see that the game was being developed by Nintendo's new Retro Studios. Retro was made up mainly of former employees from Iguana, best known for developing the Turok shooter series for the N64, and their main goal was to create games for a mature audience on the GameCube. Fun fact, it was actually Miyamoto's idea to give Retro the job of creating the next Metroid title, as well as his constant urging that eventually forced them to develop the title in the surprising first-person perspective. The extremely short demo for the Space World 2000 doesn't reveal much, but it was likely during this time that Retro was still experimenting with running the game in third person. Speaking of extremely short demonstrations, you can actually find up to 3 different suggested products from Rare at this time. One short Rare exclusive reel showed everyone's favorite Space World 2000 topic, a lot of characters moving at the same time. In 2 parts of this reel, we can see both the concept for what a club scene might look like for a Conker's Bad Fur Day sequel, as well as a brief Banjo-Kazooie scene, with our heroes and Mumbo running away from an angry crowd of creatures. Another brief clip that we got from Nintendo's main reel was a look at what Joanna Dark might look like in a Perfect Dark sequel for the GameCube. Unfortunately for Nintendo fans, Rare was bought out by Microsoft in 2002, ending many of these projects first displayed at Space World 2000. While some of these original projects were moved to the Xbox directly, like Cameo and Grabbed by the Ghoulies, it wouldn't be until the Xbox 360 that Perfect Dark Zero would finally be released. But among all these demos, by far the most popular was The Legend of Zelda Space World 2000. Remember that short tech demo that we got for Zelda 64 in 1996 that looked nothing like the final game? We'd get another trailer just like this in 2000, and it's crazy just how far polygons had improved over those 4 short years. I know this is just an old clip, but I still remember how pumped I got when I first saw it. Link and Ganondorf are locked in an intense duel. Ganondorf changes his stance and gives Link the Neo and winds up. Link, in the heat of the moment, tosses his shield aside and slams into Ganondorf with a 2-handed Master Sword swing. It's dumb, it doesn't show any gameplay, but this silly trailer had 10-year-old me pumped for what a new Zelda could be on the GameCube. Then, infamously, we got this Zelda trailer 1 year later. Gone was the mature and realistic Link demo, instead replaced by the more childish cel-shaded look. Simply put, 2001 gamers weren't ready for this kind of bold graphical change. And you can tell from the much quieter, confused applause at the end of the trailer. What happened to that realistic Zelda? Now, I've had many years to mature, and I've seen the way that most games of this era actually look pretty bad today, but I can say with certainty that the Wind Waker has aged incredibly well visually. Not even including the HD remake, I still think that the GameCube's Wind Waker looks fantastic today. But I wasn't quite as smart or level-headed when I was 10 years old, and I was baffled at Nintendo's departure from a realistic style as well. It turns out that series director Eiji Aonuma was one of the few out there that was really disappointed with the Space World 2000 demo. He felt that simply having more polygons wasn't enough to evolve the Legend of Zelda series, and changing the game's visual style was one of the first major changes in direction for the series after its 2000 reveal. It's funny to me how almost every 3D home console for Nintendo has been accompanied with a Zelda tech demo. They did it with the Wii U too, and once again, we'd see that the actual main title for the Wii U looks completely different than the demo's visual style. I think for many gamers out there, simply hearing the word Space World immediately brings up memories of this trailer, and I feel like it's the perfect stopping point for a 3-part series. Just like the Zelda trailer, Space World presented new and exciting things, and while not everything that you saw there ended up becoming a reality, it was a blast trying to unearth every bit of info that you could, trying to figure out just what Nintendo's next big plan would be. Nintendo has since evolved from the Space World show format to Nintendo Directs, and while these unveilings are completely digital, as opposed to large events on a show floor, they still mimic a lot of the feelings I used to get from the big Space World unveilings. Even though they're just glorified commercials, it's still hard not to get excited every time I hear Nintendo is up to something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this little trek through Nintendo's history. I'm curious to see how Nintendo can evolve and learn from some of its patterns that have remained over the last 20 years, and as usual, I can't wait to hear more about their next big console. If you want to check out the last episode, or the video that inspired this series in the first place, you can find both of those right here. You can also subscribe to the channel and get updates when my new videos drop right here. Thank you for watching this series, and I'll see you guys next time with more Nintendo content.